Welcome so much to this conversation. We're talking healing broken wounds. This conversation particularly requires a bit of softness, some honesty, and because many of us are functioning, we're performing life, and we're barely hanging in there. This one is all about trying to really get past that performance of life, that trying to achieve things and not feeling like we're sustaining it. So without any further ado, let's head into the conversation because some of us are healing from things and some of us are still trying to figure out what the journey of healing looks like, what point A to point B is going to look like. So let's get the panel to introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Promise. Just a brief intro of how you would like to be known.
Hi, Olotu, and hi, everyone. My name is Promise Makunyane. I'm an author. I'm a businesswoman. I'm a podcaster, and I almost wanted to say I'm a mom. And I think as part of my healing journey, I want to really unlearn, to step in rooms and identify myself with roles that serves others and not myself, you know. So I almost said I'm a mom, but I'm like, no, girl, step into your power. You know, the longest time of my life, I would come off as a mom, as a wife, you know. But now I think I'm ready to step into my power and step into a role that serves me more than anyone else, no matter who is uncomfortable, you know. So yeah, that is who I am. Thank you.
Over to you, Bianca.
Hi, I'm Bianca Keeley. I'm a psychologist and I own the Willow Therapy Center in the Four Ways area. And we work with a lot of families, a lot of women. And I found this particular conference really interesting because it's a dynamic that I've taken to supervision many, many times. There are very particular systems coming up in society at the moment. I can literally daily, there's very particular themes coming in society. And one of my questions is, it doesn't seem that anyone's addressing them. And a lot of the things that people have said this morning, I can really identify with because my clients bring it up every single day. So we work a lot with people with stress. A lot of the dynamics brought up today is very prevalent in our practice. And we work with a lot of different modalities to help people, including animal-assisted therapy, which is extremely successful in addressing a lot of the topics brought up today. And then we have a pack of dogs and a herd of horses that we work with. So it's extremely interesting dynamics coming through. So I'm very interested to see what everyone says today.
Interesting. Bongani?
Sorry. For those who don't know me, with many rumors that go around, I would confirm and to deny the rumors. I am a Sundown supporter. I love conversations and I love human beings, and I'm glad that I'm part of this room today. Thank you.
Thank you. Dineo?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dineo Ranaga, and I always like to introduce myself as a woman who is doing her best. I think of my introduction, and I always think of the hour of my death. Everything that would be an accolade would be meaningless. It is truly what my intention is that would be meaningful. And that is that I'm a woman who is truly doing her best. And that's my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those intros. So I did that because we always give your bios. We read out the bios, but it doesn't give the essence of the person or how you'd like to be known or how you'd like to be seen or how you'd like the audience to receive you. I'm going to start with you, Bianca. We talk so much about trauma. It's a word that's thrown around so much in society. Yo, trauma. Yo, I'm so traumatized. How do we define trauma and how does trauma show up in our individual lives?
And what we find in therapy is more subtle signs of trauma. So there's a really interesting book called What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry. and I reference it with a lot of my clients, and they find it extremely helpful. Because one of the things that we struggle with in our individual lives is being able to identify what the problem is, break it down for ourselves, and being able to identify what we need. And that's a very, very big problem with a lot of people. And in that book, it describes how the brain processes trauma. So a lot of our unprocessed space gets stored in the basal root of the brain. And people forget to process as they go through life. So a lot of our trauma in society that we sit with is often through the developmental space where we weren't taught to meet our needs effectively. And in the book it describes, even with raising children, it's often when children are not met with the emotional support that they need at the time of development. So we often say, it's parents don't intentionally do it, it's not something that families intend to do, but it happens all the way through life, and it's something that's very prevalent even in South Africa. And we find people get very stuck in their lives where they struggle to meet their needs. And so I think trauma needs to be understood on a more subtle sense, because if we can't emotionally integrate and we haven't taught to emotionally process effectively, we then struggle to meet our needs, which then creates increased stress. And our brain can't cope with that. So that's probably the most prevalent thing that we deal with every single day.
Promise said something so interesting in her intro of how she doesn't want to identify as a mom or a wife or all these other titles that don't necessarily serve her, but they serve other people. She wants to identify with titles that serve her and are of service to her and others. Was that right?
You are right. Not necessarily I don't want to be identified as them, but I want to also show up as Promise Makunyane, the woman. So yes, you are right, actually. I don't want to step in rooms on roles that are going to not serve Promise, but serve other people, yes.
So where I'm getting with this is, a lot of us come from spaces where we served and we took on roles and titles, Bianca, out of trauma. So, I mean, particularly me, I was mom, wife, homemaker, because there's so much in my past that I was like, I'm going to do that better than my mom did it, because, I mean, her marriage ended, mine is not. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 because of... And you end up having to work through and unstrip certain things so that you can deal with your own trauma. Can you talk about that maybe from your perspective, Promise, of what did you have to unstrip to come to that? And then, Bianca, can you then hedge onto that on certain things that you see in practice?
As you were explaining yourself, you were saying that you needed to outperform your mom, right? It's more like outperforming your mom. For me, I wanted to look like my mom, that has been in a marriage for 39 years. She's taking care of the home, the kids, and everybody else. And that, for me, it was me saying that, okay, mom did this, but is it serving me in this time and age and in my own marriage and in my own motherhood journey? So for me, please repeat your question. I lost my train of thought.
So did that come from a place of trauma to wear those hats and then to have to undress them later?
Yeah. So yes, as I was saying, that it is just what I know, my default setting, and looking at my mom being everything else to everybody but not herself. And learning it, I must say, Oloito is so painful. It's so painful. It's you going against yourself. I'm 33 years old. 33 years of my life, that's what I knew. And right now, going the other way, and family and everybody else is looking at you like, girl, that's not how we do it. Are you okay? And stuff like are you okay? And having to unlearn it is going against people that still believe that this is the way of life. This is how it's supposed to go. So it's uncomfortable. It's the most uncomfortable position that I'm in. But the question is, how do I feel? I feel very good. I feel very content, and I feel very empowered. I don't have to do what my mom did. I don't have to do what I did 5 years ago. I got married 8 years ago. I'm allowed to evolve. I'm allowed to change my mind. I'm allowed to say, okay, 25-year-old Promise that got married, 25-year-old Promise that had kids, now says, I actually don't really want to go up front as those roles anymore. And I'm allowed, I need to be given space for me to redefine myself.
Bianca?
Okay. that's also a really, really interesting question. Again, something that we see every day. And it will be interesting to open the floor up at a later stage for comments. But something I get a lot from women in practice is that a lot of women from our generation have been brought up that we can have it all. So previously, in dating back into the 1970s, before women's rights became into effect, the generation after that brought their girls up to say, well, you can get married and have kids and have a career, go study, have it all. And it's having an interesting knock-on effect in society. And it's something, this I find I get every single day, whether it's in individual therapy, whether it's in couples therapy, is that, the previous panel addressed it, is that women are wearing too many hats at the same time. And there's a tremendous amount of clients that are coming in that are extremely burnt out, but they're also feeling really stuck. And through the conversations in therapy, we talk about how they're a mother and a wife, and they're working, and they come home, and they feel the need to cook and clean and do homework and get the kids ready for the next day, and it's too much. And women don't seem to have the language to say, actually, it's okay that I can't do all of this, and how do I bring in support? It's nearly like, and in the previous panel they referenced it, is that women are not a very good support for each other. And this comes into our rooms every single day, and it's something that, again, we talk about in supervision, is what are women needing to start, talking about the burnout and the fact that they can't do it all. And women don't seem to accept, I actually can't do it all. It's literally not possible. And then it filters down into couples counseling, where I find that women are not talking openly about the strain, and then resentment builds up over time. And then they'll sit in the room and go, but, my husband goes to work and comes home, but we're not wearing the same hats. And it's interesting how these conversations are not happening in homes. So in the room, when we start picking at it, often the men aren't even aware that their wives are feeling that way. And the question is why? How are these conversations not happening? And that seems to be a very big problem happening in families. So if you're filtering it down from the individual into the couple, into the families, and we try and flesh out these dynamics, that definitely needs to be addressed, because we're not having open conversations about it enough. And there needs to be a fleshing out process, and what are we needing? And often when we work with families, each family can find a way to resolve how we wear these hats, but it's definitely a very urgent issue in society happening at the moment.
Dino, I'm going to come to you, and then I'm going to come to Bongani. I think both of you have kind of worn both your healing and your wounds in the public eye, and you've gone through the journeys in the public eye. Dino, what triggered the need for you to realize, I need healing, I need to do the work, I am a traumatized being, but I'm also not going to stop doing life? Because I think generally that's what we do. We pause, we stop doing life because I need to heal, I need to arrive at a destination. But you've shown us that I can both do the healing work and still live.
So I have done therapy for a number of years, and I've sat with psychologists, I've sat with therapists, and in every psychologist's office that I've walked in, they all want to take me through the Sigmund Freud way of psychology, and they want to say, heal your inner child. When I read the Bible, God says, I'm doing a new thing. Can you not see? Heal the inner child. God says, I'm doing a new thing. So for me, it was the realization between the goodwill and the good intention of psychology, but the exclusion of my spiritual evolution in sitting on the couch, right? So for me, it's instead of healing the inner child, doing what Sigmund Freud would advise, I'd rather go the Carl Jung direction and create a playground for my inner child, right? So what I do is I intentionally seek out things that bring me into what God is saying, which is the new thing. And therefore, when I would look at my life and say, but you're not progressing, you're not moving forward, you're not arriving at rising above your trauma, I would always try and connect the dots. What's keeping me stuck? And it would always be the healing of the inner child. That child does not deserve to be reburdened by what they experienced then when they were a child. And I found, this is just for me, every time I revisit healing the inner child, I burden that inner child because I'm replaying a broken record of pain in my mind. But my spirit has a desire to move forward. My spirit has a desire to not be like Lot's wife. My spirit has a desire to believe God for Isaiah 43:19, saying, I am doing a new thing. Can you not see? So that in me sitting and saying, I know these things happened to me when I was a child and they were wrong, but they are no longer happening now. And that is just a fact. And I really want to bring the fact by using an example of something as traumatic as rape. We're in a room, it's women, this happens, right? If it happened 10 years ago, there is a truth you must ask yourself in the inner dialogue and the story you are telling yourself. Why am I repeating this narrative of pain to myself over and over again? Am I repeating it because I am telling, I'm collecting sympathy now? I want to so desperately be believed? Or am I telling this narrative because I'm trying to unravel the noodles in my head and arrive at a point where I'm separating the two journeys, the journey of happiness, which is no destination, and the journey of healing, where I believe there is a destination. There has to come a point where you get off the pity party truck, where you get off the sadness truck, where you get off the I'm depressed truck, where you get off the he raped me truck, you get off the my husband beat me truck, he cheated truck. You have to get off the truck. And for me, that has always been my thing. That has always been how I come to processing, pursuing the new thing, and not silencing the old thing, but placing it where it no longer has a stronghold over me. So whatever sad thing that has transpired, I refuse to relate it to my childhood. I refuse. I have argued with many of my therapists. No, but you have to understand it for what?
And let me bring Bianca here.
For
Bianca,
what? Before you bring Bianca in, if I may, before you bring Bianca in. For what?
That's a battle with a therapist.
Yeah, it's a battle of the
and I want you, and truly, I always say to people, do not sit in a church and not know your own Bible. Do not sit with a therapist and not have an understanding of yourself. Do not make that mistake. Question the advice. Question the counsel. Question your own habits. Question the reality, because the truth is you will always remain as sick as the lies you tell yourself.
Okay. Okay, that's a very different perspective. I've been to a lot of therapy, but it's a refreshing and different perspective. I want to rope in the expert here, who is Bianca, and I hear what Dineo was saying. It makes sense what Dineo was saying. It makes sense how Dineo is reframing how her healing journey is. What are the pros and cons of that reframing?
So I actually agree with her. There's two parts to that. The reason when you go to therapy, particularly in the beginning stages of therapy, one of the reasons it depends what you present, first of all, and it also depends what the client's need is. And I think finding the correct therapist fit is quite important to get quite a few different modalities. And it's very important to maybe have an integrative approach. One of the reasons psychologists often ask us about our history is because in the book, like What Happened to You, for instance, it's quite a layered process in terms of the way our brain develops. And there's that saying, there's no perfect family, no perfect child, no perfect parent. And what happens in our development in terms of our coping skills is like I call it, when I describe it to my clients, I'm like, there's blocks missing. Like you're building a house, but every now and then there's a brick missing. And the therapist, in order to understand where the client's blocks are missing, is we have to track back often, not in all cases, it completely depends what comes into the room. But we want to understand what blocks are missing so that we don't have the ability as a child to replace those blocks. But when we become an adult, because our brain finishes myelinating at 25, we have the ability to then replace those coping skills and to build on and add on to that. So there's that reason. The other reason is that trauma or things that aren't processed get stored in the basal root of the brain, and that it was really beautifully described by your previous speaker. As a psychologist, I can't fault how he described it. I mean, I was just, as he sat down, I'm like, you were amazing. Like, I love that. And so we got to appreciate how the brain works. And so a lot of our unprocessed elements get stored in the basal root of the brain, and he did mention different parts. And what happens is for the brain to release trauma, often we need to take the information from the basal root of the brain and push it through the cortex, because trauma needs context for the brain to file it.
Okay.
And if you don't do that, the brain gets stuck.
Is that why you find a lot of therapists going back to the root issue, like Danielle was saying? They keep going back to that root issue, going back to that story that you keep telling yourself. Is that's
Because
bringing it back up?
We do create narratives. Like, for instance, in the previous example I used, a lot of women feel that to be successful in life, I need to have a PhD and be a mother and a wife and all of those types of things. And
I need to cook clean, I need to care for the children, I need to keep my career functioning, I need to...
Yeah, and where did that come from? And so, as I said, it depends what the person is needing, but, I agree with her in terms where you don't build your house there. So a lot of people go to therapy for different reasons. It's extremely important to clarify your goals and your needs with your therapist, because I get people sometimes in therapy where I'm like, they're 10 psychologists and we're still going through this bad thing that happened to me as a child. And the question is, why are you building a house there? Because we look back to understand. So how I explain it to my clients is we look back to understand which blocks are missing so that we can rebuild our house. We can complete building our house. And then you want to move forward from that. So, what she was saying was very important, is that people often, particularly in this era, people hold on to their diagnoses. They hold on to why their life isn't working. And as a therapist, it's extremely important to highlight where are you wanting to go with this. Because so we do look back to understand, but there has to be forward movement as well. So a lot of our work as therapists is actually breaking the bonds of what people feel keep them trapped, because that's not the goal of therapy. And I think if you are with a therapist who's keeping you in that cycle, you need to also clarify into the room, like, I feel I need to be moving forward at a different rate. So I agree, we do have very different perspectives, but I think it also depends which psychologist you go through and what you're also trying to work on.
Bongani, the same question for you. What triggered your healing? And again, yours also played out in the public eye to some extent. Your journey played out, part of it, on the public eye, but beyond just it playing out in community and in the public eye, what is the individual's journey?
I'm tempted to ask which journey you're referring to.
The one that we saw play out in the public eye, and also your personal journey. Maybe you can tap into that, because that's what we don't see.
Oh, that's the room I was talking about. Look, I don't necessarily think one has got much to heal from as far as that is concerned, because I walked that path having been a man that goes to therapy and lives in therapy. But also, production gave you a different picture than what I saw. But what I live with, and on an everyday basis, I'm dealing with is abandonment issues from a father who was absent and who took a decision from that. TV, that's nothing. It's a different ball game, because they wanted to show you what they wanted to show you. But because of an absent father and realizing at some point in time in my life that I can't keep on being afraid of people having to leave, having to try and lose myself in keeping people in my space, whether it be family, whether it be friends, whether it be business, whether it be love relationship, because you know somebody left. And for a longest of time, I sat with a question mark that says, but why did he leave? And until I sat in a therapy room, and again, what you were saying, it's a question of what are you seeking there? And psychologists will say, let's go through memory lane. And you say, yeah. The dark guy, bold from Durban, dribbled a yellow bone from Guatemala. She fell, and I was born, and he was gone. You know? And when you paint that scenario, instead of having to deal with where I am now, we might want to hold my current situation to my past. And if you are not conscious of what is it, where you are coming from, and where you are and where you want to go, you might end up sitting for a long time in this place of having to feel pity for yourself. But once you are conscious, you are then able to say, that happened, and where I am, what do I want to achieve? And I remember the therapist saying, in the midst of trying to understand this relationship with my father, she then said, probably since you don't think there's anything that's going to come from the conversation, because I think I met the guy when I was 19, 20, if I'm not mistaken, you know? And we tried to build the relationship, but in Tambo being Afiki, a paraffinin, you know? And I had to make peace that there's nothing I can do, because you end up having to be buying a relationship.
Yeah.
I remember having to say to him, the only thing you need to do is come to Johannesburg, meet my mother's family, apologize. We don't even need chickens or cows. It's okay just for you to apologize. And the man says, when I have money, I'll come through. And then you then say to him, can I give you petrol money or should I buy you an air ticket? So now you end up having to be buying for this person to be. So therapist says, write a letter to him. And unfortunately, by the time I wrote the letter, he was dead. And in the letter, I said, part of me knowing there's nothing that's going to come out of this conversation is because of I have sat with this man and I waited for him to actually be the one that explains why he has not been there. Because sometimes society teaches us certain habits. You don't talk up to abantu abadala. You don't want to also lose him once more because now he's here. As much as the relationship is taking, but he's here. Do you want to give him another reason to leave, or do you allow him to sit here in this incomplete relationship? And I allowed him to sit. But in my sitting, I was analyzing him, and I knew that, unfortunately, I will not get the answers that I want. So I had to then say, from therapy, I want to take charge of my life moving forward, where I'm not scared of people having to leave the room, which is the relationship I'm trying to build with them. And I've lived in therapy for the past 8, if not 9 years, and that is what has made me to look at things in a different way than I used to.
That is so profound, so profound. How now I get the idea of not building a house. I think from that loop, like that loop of conversation, I get the idea of not building a house. I think because we tend to mull in the issue and we don't deal with the actual issue and how to move forward from it. And how has that reframed fatherhood for you going forward?
Look, it's still a battle of having to understand, am I fathering from a wound or trauma, or I'm actually here doing this and seeing how best I can do it, you know? Because there are things that I would think of and like, I used to play tennis, and there are times I wish this guy was here. So if my daughter says she's doing swimming, even if when parents are not needed, I find myself in that room. So at times I pause and say, am I doing this because I have a point to prove, or I'm doing it solely because of I enjoy it so much? You know? Because also another thing, within the midst of this evolving world, we've got economies. I've got a psychologist friend, Anel. I say to Anel, I think we're also living in a psychology economy world now, where we tend to take things and want to refer them to psychology. Bongani doesn't like the color green. You know? It has got nothing to do with how I grew up. My mother didn't make me cut green grass as punishment. I just don't like the color green, you know? So while I have made a conscious decision to be a better father than my father, to be a present father, but also to be emotionally available for my child, I still have to do a retrospect and say, is this fully me living in this fatherhood journey and having to tell my own story, or write a new manual on how we need to show up as fathers? Or do I still have spots that say, I've got to do better than him? I'm still trying to find that footing, but the journey is quite good, having to find myself being a father and enjoying that space and having to do the unconventional things. But also it is a character teacher and a strengthener, being in that journey, navigating the journey of fatherhood.
It's so interesting hearing a man talk about how we think as women. It's so interesting because that's literally everyday life for us as women. We don't know sometimes whether we're doing this out of love or enjoyment, this motherhood, this wifing, this lifing, this homemaking, or am I on the cusp of actually resenting it? Or am I at the cusp of actually doing it out of duty? Promise, do you want to touch on that?
I do want to touch on that. Like as they were speaking, let me just take you back where they're speaking about not building a house where not building a house by your inner child, right? And I want to say part of healing is actually choosing your own identity moving forward, you know. This happened to me when I was a child. I acknowledge it because I cannot go back to 1-year-old Promise and try to mend everything that happened to me. However, I'm acknowledging what happened to me and I'm redefining who I am going forward. So that was so profound that the speaker said. You said, do we love what we do? Like if, please ask me again. I don't know why I'm nervous. I speak for a living, but today I'm so nervous.
I think maybe, let me phrase it in this way.
Yeah.
We have, I always call them the 4 C's as women: cooking, cleaning, caring, career.
Yeah.
We wake up in the morning, make breakfast, you get the kids ready for school, you tidy up the house, you go to work, you come back, there's homework, then you have to tidy up, get the kids to bed, then you have to tidy up the house and clean before they, as they head off to bed. Then it's rinse and repeat. Then you have to do the extramurals with the kids. Then it's the weekend extramural activities. Then it's the running around to kiddies' parties. At some point you're tired, but you're like, I've got to show up. I've got to do this.
Yeah.
Do you find sometimes there's that little bit of an area where you're doing it out of duty, but there's a little bit of that resentment, leaning onto the little resentment, but you also love it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, and with most women, especially traditional women or women that grew up in a traditional household, it's just a default setting that I'm going to have to take care of my kids, take care of my husband. But in the long run, if you don't sit with yourself and ask yourself, do I really want to do this? Am I also supported enough for me to step in these roles? I found myself tending to forget who I was, and that in the long run, stepping up for my husband, stepping up for my children, stepping up for everybody else around, my in-laws, in the long run, it exhausted me. And that's where now you have to sit down with yourself as part of your healing, that looking back, did I really want to do the things that I was doing, or I was just doing them as a part of my default setting, I was just doing them as something that I just know that I had to do. Who is Promise? Revisiting the inner child, And even when you revisit the inner child, you're going to find Promise that is wounded. But who is that girl now moving forward to the woman that I want to be, over and above me being a mother, over and above me being a wife, So I think these roles, they exhaust us. We tend to find ourselves, and it's so uncomfortable to actually sit with yourself and say that, yes, I've been a wife, I've been this, I've been that, but I'm so tired, I'm so uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. Actually, I love my children, but I don't want to show up the way I was showing up all my life, Actually, do I really wanted to get married, or it was just the idea and what I know that I must do as a young girl?
Dee? I know.
I'm not even gonna lie, I hate pregnancy, I hate parenting. I don't enjoy it. No, I don't enjoy it. I'm not even gonna lie to myself and say, oh, there are moments. There's not a single moment. It's thankless. There's not a single moment. I'm not even gonna lie, I don't enjoy it, but I'm blown away at how much it teaches me, at how much it changes me, at how much it challenges me. So for me, I wake up every morning and I'm like, we're parenting. We're parenting, and we're gonna parent the best way we know how, and we're gonna discipline them, and we're gonna make it hard for them. And no, they're not attending the birthday party this weekend. You know why? Because I'm tired and I just wanna laze in my bed and do nothing. But mommy, the party, literally this weekend, this is what happened. Mom, the party, I'm resting. If you can get yourself to that party, please go. But for as long as I'm your Uber, I am sleeping. So no, your social life will be on my rest clock. Because this brain, as yes, as he had said, we mustn't take this thing as a joke. When women come to me with relationship problems, I tell them, eat for your brain. I'm not going to tell you what to eat. You go and research what food you need to make your brain sharp while you're making executive decisions on who are you hiring and who are you firing. Nutrition first. Spirituality important. Community important. And my children are against my rest. They are an enemy of progress. But I love the way God has placed them in my life to make a new thing out of me. Yo. But every day I hate it. Every day, not a lie. I love them. I can't stand parenting. It's so hard.
Just to add, and I think women as well must ask themselves this question, Dineo. And I realized the year I started staying with my daughter full time. I think by second month I was burned out, and I wondered, what the hell do women
It fascinates
eat?
me when men start parenting. Fascinating.
What the hell do women eat? You must wake up, make sure this one wakes up, baths, leaves the room untidy, make sure there's food.
Can I tell you
there's
what
a
we
lunchbox.
eat? Our diet, the female diet and the male diet
Completely
is very different. There's one ingredient that women eat on a daily basis. And I think men miss this ingredient in their diet. Women ensure to eat no excuses. Men eat all the excuses.
Wow.
and now with a sprinkle of audacity.
A sprinkle of audacity.
audacity.
We literally don't give ourselves an excuse.
Keep it moving.
Yeah.
So, look, I don't think we've been exposed to this responsibility.
To lack of audacity.
Especially on this.
I
know,
can argue
because
that.
of.
I can argue that. It's an instinct thing. It's not an exposure thing.
No.
It's an instinct thing. You seeded the child.
See, my point comes from
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Ne? I've been a present father, but I've not been staying with my daughter full time.
Yeah.
The narrative I'm coming with is the ability of having to wake up, take care of them, after dropping them off at school, still show up for yourself, utlape, and go to work. After work, have a little bit of 30 minutes going to the gym. After gym, be able to jump into a call and have a girl session. Dineo wants to vent because of one child lost a shoe or whatever. As I was sitting there in these 2 months, I'm like, where do you guys get the strength?
Yeah.
Looking at the women's ability to navigate these streets, and where we are sitting, we're like, it's a piece of cake. But until you have to wear the shoes, and then you have a different perspective, because now you're sitting from where the woman is sitting. You know?
And then the couples end up at Bianca's
At
couch.
Bianca's office.
And then we're quietly exhausted, and you're like, but how?
Yes.
But how?
You know? So that's why I'm saying that until you get that exposure, you sit differently. It's like a man who has been in a labor ward and saw their partner give birth. You've got to have a different mind shift once you see what the crossroad that women go through of having to be between life and death, having to actually give a passage for another life to be born, you know? So I'm saying until we probably get exposed into these things and we wear these shoes, we then get a better sense while we're trying to unlearn some of the things that we've learned in society.
I mean, I always say, if you're a married woman, take weekends away yourself. Get away.
Yes.
Leave dad with the kids. Get away. Take that weekend away so you can see what the real cost of parenting is. It's not just financial. It's emotional.
Yeah.
It's psychological. It's testing. It will humble him. Trust me.
If I can add to that, sometimes don't go away. Sometimes stay and do nothing. Sometimes stay.
But it's so tempting to know. It's so tempting to do it.
Let your presence.
It's so tempting to just get up and do it.
But here's the thing that I've learned, and I've taught my mom this. I've taught my mom this. And I've taught her now this at late in their marriage. Like, I've been my parents' marriage counselor for the longest time, and I was only married for 3 months or something
Are you
stupid
not tired?
like that.
You must
I
be
was.
tired.
Listen, my experience in marriage is like a mistake of a second cycle in a month. It'll come, and then it'll go, no, we're waiting for next month. So that's how I got married. It was really short-lived, and I'm so proud of it. The best thing I've ever done in my life was divorce. I am proud of it. But here's the thing. I've taught my mom, Ma, look at my dad and see where his gaps are and stop filling them in. Stop filling them in. Nature does not allow for a vacuum. Wherever there's a crack on the road, a little bit of grass will grow. Wherever there's a hole somewhere, a bird will die there, something will grow there, something will fall there. Nature does not allow for a vacuum. So sit back and watch him when he does not get his breakfast. And follow your feeling of discomfort. Follow the urge to make him the breakfast. Follow that urge, but don't act on it. And it's not a rebellion against your husband. It's a rewiring of your own brain. It's teaching your brain a little bit of a something different. And it's not to deny your partner love. It's not coming from a place of punishment. It's coming from a place of self-nurture. To say, look at his gaps. Monitor his gaps and study how he survives in your absence. Because let me tell you something. If you fail to think of life in its finality, which is death, now everyone will leave you. Death cancels any abandonment issue you will have. Think of how many people will die by the time you turn a certain age. You will probably outlive a lot of people in your life. If you think of everyone dropping dead like flies in your life, you will say, I am attached to nothing. I enjoy and receive every passing moment as a visit. And like a bird, I will let it go. So I said to my mom, follow my dad's gaps. And you know, she did it. And successfully now, my mom can rest in her home without having to worry about a budget for holiday, without worrying about this, without worrying about that. My father is now retrained to actually have the kindness as a husband to look at his woman's exhaustion and say, today I'll make my own tea. And maybe ask her if she wants some. Tomorrow I'll be doing the cooking. And maybe ask her and say, do you want to wash the dishes or do you want to do it tomorrow? Because, just rest. There's a certain rewiring that not only happens when you are sleeping and resting, but there's a rewiring that happens as you are awake and living and acting out certain things. That's why I've allowed myself to break publicly and heal publicly, because it is only through loving again, and not only romantic love. It is only through trying again, the friendship, the business partnership, the this, the that, and the other, that I am able to be operated at a deep level of learning how to feel things well again, but first from self. and sometimes to take the holiday. It's like going to Venus for a week, and then you come back, you're exhausted. Why? Because you ran away, you didn't deal. You didn't deal.
You have a point. You have a point.
I don't like agreeing with Dineo.
No,
It was
she
not
has,
my
she has
intention.
a point.
Yeah.
But then there's that instinct. I still say there's that instinct to want, you know? Bianca, I want you to latch on to some of the points Dineo and Bongani made on just that, the lack of male participation in parenting, the way that Dineo describes partnership, and you've got to take a step back. How does that sometimes pan out in therapy and pan out in the healing journey of couples, of relationships, of parenting dynamics or co-parenting dynamics, of the healing journey maybe between co-parents who are parenting children and the one goes, I'm taking my hands off, let me see if you can do it?
That's another very important statement because that's so prevalent within our work. So you get things called intergenerational patterns, okay? And there was a saying I read where society's moving quicker than culture. And so what's happening through intergenerational patterns, not only within families, but within cultures, and I often say all cultures have like strengths and glitches, for instance. And in South Africa, we've got a lot of cohesive cultures, and in cohesive cultures, women are often brought up to nurture and look after. So even if I do play therapy with a child, for instance, where I'm seeing a family, I can't tell you how many times the mom comes in and she'll start helping the little boy pack away the toys. Or she'll say to her daughter, help your brother pack away the toys. And you're watching these patterns play out. And then often what happens is there's, within sibling rivalry and things, the girl, because we were living in a modern society, will start asking me, but how come I've got to do chores and my brother doesn't have to do the same chores? How come I must help my brother pick up toys, for instance? And so when we reflect it back to the mom, sometimes the mom isn't even aware that she's doing that. And then we bring in the children and get their feedback around what's happening. And so when I say society is moving quicker than culture, we're still living in a theme where women are brought up to look after and nurture. And when they feel they're not fulfilling those roles to the max with wearing all these hats, they start feeling a lot of guilt, they start feeling like they're not good enough. But that's where my question is what is needed within the families to have these open conversations? Because it's not like fathers aren't capable. Sometimes in couples counseling, the husband isn't even aware that their wife is feeling a certain way. And it's about breaking down between the couple with what works for them in the now. Where is your family now? What type of support are you needing as individuals within your relationship? What type of conversations are not happening? And through therapy, we break those down, and it often is about, perceiving like our partner's looking tired, or as Brene Brown would say, her husband and her use like an 80-20 rule, for instance. So if one person comes home and they're depleted, the other partner picks up the slack for that day, and the next day it might be different. But the collaboration and the communication is absolutely vital to be able to effectively express our needs and then develop strategies within the family so that we can create more balance. Because it's not that a lot of men aren't even willing to help. It's sometimes feedback I also get from fathers is, but she just does it. But it's already done, and things like that. And then the question is, then again, facilitating the conversations around, but can we speak up? Can we say, okay, I'm taking this child to school, can you take that child to school?
Before I open up for questions, I want to throw a spanner in there. We still live in a very patriarchal society.
Yes,
we still live in a very misogynistic society
Yes.
where men don't feel like you're entitled to their help. They'll sit in that therapy room and tell you, but it's her job.
Or my favorite is when dads say, who are brought up in more patriarchal families, for instance, they'll say, but she should be more grateful. I babysat the children last night. And then I put a pin in that very quickly, and I'm like, you can't babysit your own children. That's called parenting. And again, you are right. It completely depends on the families that these individuals were brought up in. But again, if it's not working in your family, If your wife is stretched and she's not coping, or the children are having needs or those kind of things, what are we willing to do as a family to address that? Because it's not about only the individual.
And there's, sorry, no, Bendel, I know you, time-wise. One other thing I wanted to raise is because the economics are also shifting where women are also earning, they've got careers, they're earning, what's one thing that you're finding also in the therapy room?
Oh, that's a very hot topic. That was actually, I was wondering if that was going to come up today. So the one element that comes up is this role division within society and how can we make it more even in families. The other one is women who are sometimes superseding their partners in income, position, title, things like that. And it does depend again, you know, what type of families these individuals come from. But I do find that it brings quite a lot of tenuous sessions to my room. And it's something, again, that needs to be addressed because it's not, couples aren't always coping when the roles shift like that. And suddenly we can't partner together. Suddenly we can't have these open communications together. And it's very interesting seeing that come into the room because the two dynamics I've spoken about today literally come into my room every single day, whether in individual or in couples. Or something that also is a very interesting situation is when a marriage has gone from what we call a complementary one-down system and the wife has been in the follow and it flips. So sometimes what happens is that the wife might have performed a role, one when the dad was maybe more of a breadwinner and things like that, and now she earns more than them. It's very interesting to see the woman's perspective. You know, tongue in cheek, there's sometimes quite a lot of resentment that comes out in those sessions because suddenly all the skeletons come out of the closet. And again, it's something we need to deal with because if from a societal perspective, we are where women have equal rights and they're earning sometimes equal or more. But again, if you
culturally, it's a whole different
but culturally,
dynamic.
it's a completely different dynamic, and we're very far from balancing it out. Very, very far.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, two reflections. There's one there.
Hi, greetings everyone. My name is Pipila Matlare, and I'm from Bara Healing and Sounding Institute, which is a center for the applied music and indigenous healing arts. I'm very, very passionate about this topic because healing is just at the center of what we do, and the programs that I run, I do addiction therapy, womb healing. So I'm working with women, working with men as well. I'm very much in this space, and I also have programs for the youth. So I was really wanting us to lead into the young ones that are here who are, you know, we're speaking about healing today, but now what about people who are in the environment? Or, I mean, we are all going through our challenges and we know that these challenges are not going to go anywhere, right? But now young people are growing up in environments that are abusive, that are toxic, that are causing, still inflicting trauma, you know? Our society is shaped by where it is we come from. We're speaking about how we need to go back. Going back, knowing where we come from is how we know where we're going. And in that sense, when it comes to healing, it's like understanding what the wounds are makes us know what it is that needs to be repaired. What about those who are still at the forefront of it? You know, young people are, you know, we don't have agency in that way to say in the home, this is happening, this is what's happening, you know, what are their outlets, what are they, what can we say to them as they are encountering, one of the things that come to mind is this Setswana teaching, you know, and I think in today's time we don't realize that I think our parents have forgotten about that because it's always about instruction in the home, and you are not encouraged to almost, your input is not something that is seen, you know. I love what you're saying, Sister Nero, that complex dynamic with your kids of how they are there and they're actually here to show you something as well, but we grow up in a way where it's like you're being suppressed. So for them, what is it that can be done that can lessen the time that they don't have to now deal with these things when they're grown, when they're adults, when they're ready, you know? So what are the little just speaking to the patriarchy and how those who are still benefiting from the, the status quo is the saying of how girls are raised and boys are loved, and
That's deep.
yeah.
That's heavy.
Girls are raised and boys are loved, and that's what it is. You were always busy. You're always busy. We're always busy as women. It doesn't matter whether you have kids, whether you don't have kids. You're always busy. But the boys are reading books. They're reading the newspaper.
That's so true, because we always talk about the rich auntie, the auntie that's always present. Where are the uncles? Where are the uncles?
And what happens in communal settings as well, at our funerals? What do we see? We see the men sitting in circle, having beer,
It's the drunk uncle, but the rich auntie.
And this is the things that as young people, growing up, you are exposed to that. And I think when you are at that age, you don't know what's happening. It's just happening. So I would love for us to speak to that, but I understand that there's no time. But I just want to say thank you so much.
It's so unfortunate that we don't have time to unpack that, but it's something to give a thought about. Maybe next year we'll have a more,
If Debbie can also just take to her socials, I'm not sure how powerful you are or
Bianca.
confident you are, Bianca, sorry, on your social media platforms. But it would be nice, following this, to come to your social media platforms and hear how you would unpack that. Because I think my takeaway from what she said is the most frightening thing. When I think of myself as a woman who is economically not advanced and I'm trapped in a marriage and I'm just getting abused, if I don't have autonomy, resources, or understanding of my autonomy as well as my agency, I'll remain trapped. So children are just like that. They don't have the resources, they don't have the agency, they don't even have the strong voice yet. So how do they, in these sorts of households that are perpetuating this abuse, find pockets of relief and pockets of hope that there is a new thing being done beyond this season? I would love to come to your socials and find that.
And how do they remain present in it and understand what's going on right
100%.
now so that you don't have to go and unpack in 20 years' time?
100%.
That's a very interesting one. One more over here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oluwatu. Good afternoon to everyone. And first and foremost, I would like to thank you, Tumi, for organizing the space for all of us to come and consume all this empowering information to take home, to apply to ourselves. So I am Ayanda Mdleje, and I am a legal professional in the public sector. So, yeah.
Clock it.
So I'm also a single mother of 2 girls. My firstborn graduated on Monday. She is graduated psychology. So it's a very long journey. There's still a lot of money to be spent on this journey. So my take, or what I would like to feedback on, it's the issue of the mental health space, the psychology space, how it can be opened up to everyone to have access to the services, because it is not everyone who has the access. It's not everyone because of the financial resources or the lack thereof. So I'm just saying there's got to be a thinking around how we are going to open up this industry to everyone. Because for someone to afford a clinical psychologist, because it's a specialized space, it's a lot of money. And it's not everyone who can afford it. And where people are mostly violated or going through mental illnesses are in the townships, are in the rural areas. They are not regulated. No one is looking after them. Everyone is too scared to go that far to go and help. So I was just saying it's something that we need as the community, and we who have the access towards to have a conversation, to open up the industry so that it can be accessed by everyone. Thank you.
You know, I see so much vision in this. Woman Can, Dumi. A chapter for the legal community, a chapter for the psychology community, a chapter for the media community. Like, there's so much that you're still going to do with this. And I think this is where that chapter for the psychology community coming together under Woman Can then form projects where they go out in these communities and go deal with these issues, because there is a gap there. Just like that, we're going to be closing this segment on healing. Thank you so much to my panelists. Really appreciate the gems. And again, we don't have enough time to kind of go in depth, but we are going to, I think, throughout the year, there's projects I'm pretty sure Dumi has where we'll unpack some of these subjects a little bit more. Stay tuned to Woman Can's website and social media. Some of these topics are addressed and the conversations are there. Thank you.
We can